Okay, so now I want to talk about the sort of the basic units of the nervous system, the neuron. And I want to give you a sense of what the neuron is doing. The neuron is actually conveying information. It's carrying information. It is, at one end, sort of detecting changes, right, in the environment. Changes in light, in heat, in chemicals. We have a lot of specialized neurons that detect changes in both the external and the internal environment. And then they have to carry that information, into the central nervous system. And then there's going to be, some interaction with other neurons in that central nervous system, but ultimately you're going to respond behaviorally to whatever that information is. You're going to actually make some sort of a movement. So what we're going to focus on now is how these networks, how these individual neurons actually carry information along their lengths. And the way they do that is in the form of an electric current. So, but I wanted to step back and actually give you a sense of the whole process. So neurons are actually, carrying information electrically along their length. But if it just goes along a neuron, if the information travels from one end to the other, that's not enough. These neurons are actually linked up in larger networks that allow that information to be, organized, in some cases perceived, and also linked to some sort of motor or behavioral output. So let's step back and look at what we refer to as a neural network. So we have lots and lots of sensory neurons, right? Neurons that are arrayed throughout the body that respond to specific forms of energy in both the internal and external environments. So we have neurons that are specialized for the detection of light, right? Photons striking the retina. We have neurons that are specialized for the detection of heat, which is literally the movement of molecules, right? The faster they move, the warmer, the hotter, something is going to be perceived as. We have specialized neurons that respond to pressure, to touch, on your body actually, and then we'll translate that touch into some sort of an electrical signal that we'll discuss in this section. There are neurons that respond specifically to chemicals, right? Including drugs, but there are neurons, sensory neurons, that are specialized for the detection of different, components of food that allow you to taste, food, or different odorants, different odorant molecules that are in the air that get up your nose and, bind to, specific receptors that are located on specialized sensory neurons for the detection of odors, right? There are also neurons, of course, in your cochlea or in your inner ear that are going to respond to pressure changes, in the atmosphere or sound waves and allow you to hear. So at one end of these networks, neural networks, we have these sensory neurons that respond to various forms of energy, often changes in energy, both external and internal in the body, right? And then these neurons are going to send their information electrically. So there's going to be an electrical current that we'll discuss. Something charged is going to move from one end of the neuron, in response to light, heat, pressure, chemicals, sound waves, etc., drugs, along to the next neuron, okay? And what you should note here is that there's a gap, right? This is that synapse that I've mentioned before. And at this point, we're going to discuss in a later segment how the electrical message traveling along a neuron which is filled with information about what's happening out here, is going to be translated or converted into the release of a chemical, a neurotransmitter that's going to travel across this gap and influence the response of another neuron. What I've written here is a neuron that is basically between the neuron that is sensing what's happening in your environment, right, and the neuron that is going to provoke some sort of a response in your muscles, right, or your glands, that'll actually produce some sort of behavioral response to the information, which is called a motor neuron. Those that are located between sensory neurons and motor neurons are known as interneurons. Inter is between. And if you think about the human brain, for example, most of our neurons, right, are interposed between those that are sensing changes in the environment and those that are actually producing behavioral responses. So we have, of those 100 billion neurons, the bulk of them are going to be interneurons between, right? Now, we have, again, about 100 billion neurons, and just to sort of describe the various forms that I just mentioned, a number of them are sensory. They receive information. They translate energy in the environment, either external or internal, into neuronal response, which is going to be some kind of an electrical signal, right? Motor neurons provoke behavior, they move muscles, while interneurons are going to be organized as networks that will permit us to perceive, to attend, to remember, to feel. There's going to be a great deal of higher cognitive processing that's the result of the complex interactions amongst the interneurons in your brain.